All right, in this video, I want to cover 3 players that I truly think that there's no reason at all to consider moving them off your dynasty team. These are players that I think are cornerstone assets for you going forward that you can legitimately build around. You can set your quarterback position in your superflex leagues. You can set that tight end position regardless of if you're playing in a tight end premium format or if you're playing just in a regular league, and you can go, you know what? Yeah, for the next 5 years, we're covered here. Let's go through. Let's try to identify our buy low running backs, our buy low wide receivers, so we can add to these cornerstone assets. Before we get into it, though, please go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. If you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, let me know if there's anything that I say in this video that you disagree with down there in the comment section. I'm sure that there's probably going to be a lot I say that you don't necessarily think is correct. I'd love to hear your opinion down below. And I would also love to get into a fantasy football draft with you this offseason over there on Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, I'm sure y'all have seen us live streaming on our main channel pretty much every single day drafts. Even if you don't want to get in a draft with myself, you can just go hop in a draft in the public lobby. You can go set up a draft room with your friends. And when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK, they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You will get our 2022 rankings. You will get our 2022 Dynasty rankings. You will get our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide that has over 130 pages of information. So please make sure you take advantage of that. And let's go through and let's trade for Mark Andrews. Right now, if you have Mark Andrews, no reason to be moving this tight end away. Before we dive into the production and how impressive Mark Andrews was this past season, first, let's kind of lay some groundwork here, because I know Mark Andrews has been a player that we've been talking about for quite a while. I don't want to say that I identified Mark Andrews or anything. Of course, that's not the case. The Dynasty Fantasy Football community liked Mark Andrews from the second that he was a rookie to the second that he just demonstrated that elite level efficiency on a very small amount of snaps. I mean, his rookie season, his sophomore year, he didn't get much playing time, but when he was on the field, he was literally Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce levels of efficiency. Like, you were projecting him once he got volume to be the best tight end in football. Now, of course, there's a big difference between being an efficient player with no volume and then being able to maintain that efficiency when you see the jump in snaps, when you see the jump in targets, which is what we had with Mark Andrews. But I just want to say, the man's only 26 years old. You're looking at him compared to someone like George Kittle. George Kittle's going to be 28. Travis Kelce turning 33 this season. Kelsey's turning 33, and what's crazy is if you go over to those redraft formats on Underdog, you have Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce sometimes going back-to-back picks right now in drafts. And I think that Mark Andrews will continue to rise up draft boards. Now, of course, you're going to be almost consensus having Mark Andrews over Kelce in Dynasty because the age, but still, I want to make that emphasis for this upcoming season's production, and then we can make the adjustment with his Dynasty value based on his age. And if we're comparing him to someone like TJ Hawkinson, he's only 2 years older than Hawkinson. And yeah, Kyle Pitts is only 21, but Kyle Pitts is the consensus tight end 1 in Dynasty. I'm not coming out here and saying that Mark Andrews needs to be ahead of Kyle Pitts, but I am saying you should probably consider taking him in the middle of the second round of your 12-team Superflex Dynasty startup drafts, as this is a player that this past season went out there, averaged 9 targets a game, 6.3 receptions a game, over 80 yards, and half a touchdown. I think this number can actually go up, because if you look at his points per game, that was pretty much all driven with volume, something you know we love chasing in fantasy football. This is a player that was number 1 in the NFL in his target share for this offense, where he averaged over 25% of the targets for Baltimore. 25% of the targets went to Mark Andrews. That was more than Travis Kelce had in Kansas City. That was more than Darren Waller in Las Vegas. That was more than George Kittle in San Francisco, Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. It doesn't matter who you're looking at. Mark Andrews was number 1. Now, like I said, it's not like he came out and broke fantasy football. It's not like he just destroyed Travis Kelce on a points per game basis. The reason for this is because the quarterback play was horrendous. And with this very bad quarterback play, you actually had that touchdown rate lower than you would assume for a tight end. Now, keep in mind, 5%. That's going to be about the normal touchdown rate for a wide receiver. However, tight ends, you're expecting them to get closer to 9 to 10%. So if you had that mark from Mark Andrews, if Mark Andrews gets closer to 12 to 13 touchdowns in a given season, which is completely possible given the amount of targets he's able to draw, he could break fantasy football. He could go out there and he could post some of the best tight end seasons of all time over the next 3 years. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, well, Mason, Lamar Jackson's not a great quarterback. We don't necessarily want the pass catchers for Lamar Jackson. I'll agree with you. Lamar Jackson may not be the best passer in the NFL. Obviously, he adds a lot of value with what he can do on the ground. But if we're comparing this to what Mark Andrews dealt with this past season, Tyler Huntley averaged 5.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt. 5.1. Dear God, that is horrible. I know some people, for whatever reason, they think that Tyler Huntley is a quality NFL quarterback. No. If he was a quality NFL quarterback, you know what would have happened by now? The Ravens would have shipped him out for a 4th, a 5th round pick. Like, he would already be off this Baltimore Ravens offense. If anybody in the league thought, you know what, Tyler Huntley may be better than Drew Lock, let's bring Tyler Huntley to Seattle. No, that's not the case. 5.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt. And even though Lamar Jackson isn't an incredibly talented passer, Lamar Jackson's able to get up to about 7.7 adjusted yards per pass attempt throughout his entire NFL career. Now, I will say there's going to be something that we need to at least acknowledge when it comes to Mark Andrews and the projections you'll have going forward. And that's going to be Baltimore will skew to be significantly more run heavy than they were this past season. So if you're looking at the pass attempts, if you're looking at the pass attempts, whatever you're looking at, the passing volume was dramatically up in Baltimore because you had no Dobbins. You had no Gus Edwards. And if you're running out, God, 31, 32, I don't even know how old he was. If you're running out a dusty Devontae Freeman, Baltimore really didn't have the option to lead the NFL in rushing attempts per game. Now, we can see this change, but why I'm not necessarily worried about it too much with Mark Andrews is, as we've already said, the efficiency of the passing offense will get a dramatic bump up with Lamar Jackson coming back in. And on top of this, there's more volume available in Baltimore because Hollywood Brown leaving this offense is leaving behind over 9 targets a game. This was a mistake that we acknowledged about 2 to 3 weeks ago because the second that Hollywood Brown was traded, y'all know we had a live stream up and going in less than 30 seconds. And my initial reaction was, you know what? Yeah, of course, Bateman's value goes up, but it'll be interesting to see where it lands. Maybe we sell high on Bateman because Hollywood Brown's that field stretching wide receiver, not commanding a lot of volume in the offense and really just helping other people by creating space. Well, we were horribly wrong with that. That was horrible analysis. We already went through and covered this and fixed this mistake because Hollywood Brown averaged 26%. He had 26% of the passing attempts in Baltimore this past season. He had over 9 targets a game. He had 5.7 receptions and 63 receiving yards a game. And Bateman, I'm sorry to say it, I promise you, I would be willing to bet money Rashad Bateman's not averaging 9 targets a game this upcoming season. It can't happen. So even if you get the overall dip in offensive volume by the Baltimore Ravens based on the efficiency bump as well as the loss of competition for targets, I am not worried about the fall off coming anytime soon for Mark Andrews. And I honestly want to say maybe we haven't even seen his full ceiling. Now, if we head over to Keep Trade Cut right now, you're going to see that Mark Andrews is going near the end of the second round. You have Mark Andrews going directly ahead of guys like Jalen Waddle, AJ Brown, Trevor Lawrence, Russell Wilson, T. Higgins. This is for a non-tight end premium format. I'm assuming Keep Trade Cut is non-tight end premium, and I think that he is fine staying there. Now, of course, I do have to address something. If y'all had the chance to read our Dynasty research book, over 100 pages of quality information, you could check that out on flockfantasy.com. You'll see we have a chapter in there about tight end premium. And in reality, changing your league from 1 point per reception for the tight end position to 1.5 points per reception to the tight end position doesn't change the impact that those elite level guys have in your starting lineup. It doesn't even really change the amount of tight ends you should be going in, plugging into your flex spot. If anything, it only adds like 2 viable tight ends across your entire league that you can play in the flex. So I think in the majority of tight end premium formats, you're actually going to see that people probably overvalue the premium that they are getting. Now, what I will say, please keep this in mind, is by investing into Mark Andrews in the second round of your tight end premium league, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to avoid the overvalued tight ends in the middle rounds a little bit later on. You'll be able to avoid going out of your way and drafting a Dallas Goedert too early. You're going to be able to avoid drafting a Dalton Schultz too early. And based on the fact that we can hammer in value wide receivers in those ranges, I would be ecstatic about that. So I actually think that even though you should not be bumping up the value of tight ends too much, regardless of if that's a player at the very top end of the spectrum or a depth level tight end, in theory, you shouldn't bump up their value into tight end premium format. But in reality, based on what your league mates are going to do, especially with trade value as well, kind of have to. And I'd be much more willing to bite the bullet and take someone like Mark Andrews right ahead of AJ Brown, take him ahead of someone like Jalen Waddle, and build around that asset, then try to go out there and overdraft Pat Frymuth because your league mates are pushing all those guys up. Now, if you're looking at his dynasty value chart, according to Keep Trade Cut, what's interesting is his value is about the same as where it was 2 off seasons ago. I don't necessarily understand this, but if you're looking at last April, Mark Andrews arguably had more dynasty value. Now, keep in mind, this is right after Hayden Hurst gets traded from Baltimore. Keep in mind, this is whenever you were looking at the extreme level of efficiency and people were just losing their minds of what could be from Mark Andrews. Well, he turned into exactly what you want. He turned into exactly what you want, and you're not having to pay a higher price. He's still incredibly young. We know these tight ends last until they're 31, 32, 33 years old. We also covered that with our age cliffs in that Dynasty research book. I'm all about going and getting me some Mark Andrews. Of course, you're going to have to pay the price. I can't say, oh, Mark Andrews screaming buy low, yada, yada. You're still going to have to pay a price for him. But now let's go over to someone that I think the window has opened. The door has put a little creak in it. Trey Lance. Now, I have refrained from talking about Trey Lance this offseason because y'all know I was on a mission last year. Every single video I made, I just made fun of Justin Fields and I praised Trey Lance. So I don't want to bring him up too much because people are tired of hearing me talk about him. But if you head over to Keep Trade Cut, Trey Lance, his dynasty value has gone down this offseason. And if you look at what's happened in San Francisco this offseason, nothing's happened. A report came out, not from anybody a part of the 49ers, just a random beat writer that wasn't able to quote anybody. So who the hell knows what his credentials are? It literally could mean absolutely nothing. But a report came out saying, oh, you know what? The 49ers not impressed with Trey Lance, probably going to be starting Jimmy Garoppolo. I would not be surprised if the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan himself, pulled that reporter aside and said, hey, man, do you mind tweeting this out for us? Do you mind putting the word out? Yeah, we're trying to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo here, but nobody seems to be trading for him because, I mean, the writing's on the wall. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows that the 49ers cannot afford to keep Jimmy Garoppolo another season. This is a team that went out of their way. Not only did they trade the 12th pick, but they also traded their 2022 first, and they traded their 2023 first for Trey Lance. They went out there and they traded 3 first-round picks to get Trey Lance. They had a higher asking price. They had a higher price to pay for Trey Lance than Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford went in their respective deals. Now, keep in mind, Trey Lance was on the rookie contract, whereas you're having to pay Stafford, you're having to pay Russell Wilson at the same time. So I'd say the team investment's actually a lot more for guys like Watson, Stafford, and Wilson, but still, it's in the same range. And to see that level of investment, it lets the entire NFL know that they're all in on Lance. It would legitimately be a Jamarcus Russell level bust if Trey Lance does not start this upcoming season. He is starting. So the 49ers have every incentive to try to get anything for Jimmy G, to try to get a second-round pick from the Seattle Seahawks, to try to get a second-round pick from the Carolina Panthers. Of course, it's going to be difficult because Jimmy Garoppolo has his own contract. If you go listen to the George Kittle interview, if you go through and just look at George Kittle's Instagram, go look at all the pictures of George Kittle hanging out with this guy, Trey Lance, It sounds like internally the team is ready for Trey Lance to take over. At least that was my impression of the interview. Lance is going to be the starting job. And he is walking into a situation where I don't want to say he's guaranteed to thrive, because of course nobody's guaranteed to go out there and dominate. Jonathan Taylor's not guaranteed to go out there and dominate, but the probability, in my opinion, it's very high, because if we go back and look at the past 15 years for a fantasy football purpose, and we look at quarterbacks that were drafted in the top 15 picks overall, and on top of that, had at least 60 rushing yards a game in college, there were 5 quarterbacks that fit that criteria. You have Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, RG3, and Cam Newton. What do all of those players have in common? They were all elite level fantasy producers at some point in their NFL career. They all had an absurd amount of dynasty fantasy football value at some point in their career. The reason for this is because they have the job security. And on top of that job security, when they get that job, it doesn't matter how good or bad they may be based on that rushing upside and that rushing production they are giving you. If you go out there and you average 45, 50 rushing yards in the NFL, hell, you are going to be a hyper productive quarterback for fantasy football, even if you are bad. But I don't think the odds that Trey Lance is a bad quarterback is that high, because he's stepping into a situation where he has George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and the 49ers offensive line last year was ranked 3rd according to PFF. So you have an elite offensive line. You have one of the best skill position groups in the entire NFL, one of the best coaching staffs in the entire NFL. And keep in mind, the 49ers were a field goal away from going to the Super Bowl last year. So I think it's understandable to see that Jimmy Garoppolo started throughout the entire season. I mean, you had Alex Smith starting the entire year, holding back Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs were a first round out that season. 49ers were pretty much a Super Bowl team. So I think it's understandable to see Jimmy Garoppolo go through and start. And if you're looking, you are getting that discount. Thomas, please pull up the keep trade cut chart for Trey Lance. He ended up peaking about last June, May. I mean, that's when we are, of course, hyping him up a ton. And since that, he has fallen an incredible amount. You are getting him in the 4th round of startups right now, compared to where I think he should be going at the beginning of the 2nd. Right now on Underdog Fantasy, go sign up, promo code FLOCK. He is going as the quarterback 13. That's a redraft format. Trey Lance is incredibly young. You know, if he comes out and if he just is the quarterback 13 this upcoming season, combine that with his age, this is a player that's probably going in the 1st round of startup drafts. I think that's almost safe to say, especially if you're considering the job security that he has based on the level of investment. And right now, players that are going ahead of Trey Lance, you have guys like DK Metcalf, give me Lance. Stephon Diggs, give me Lance. McCaffrey, give me Lance. Debo, give me Lance. Higgins, give me Lance. Russell Wilson, I'm fine if you want Wilson. But Trevor Lawrence is going like a full round ahead of Trey Lance's startup drafts. Lawrence does not have that same rushing upside. Now, let's move to our last quarterback. This is not going to be as exciting as Lance, as like, oh my gosh, we're polarized. We're going to go with a very boring option here, but sometimes boring gets it done. We're going to go over to Matthew Stafford, who somehow has lost value according to Keep Trade Cut over the past year. He was traded to the Rams. Everybody went all in, because if you looked at Matthew Stafford, let's just go through his career in Detroit and look at where he stacked up in passing yards. 12th in 2020. 2019, he was injured. But before that, 16th, 3rd, 6th, 8th, 9th, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd. For the Detroit Lions, I just got done talking about how the New York Jets are a dysfunctional team, and I would be very surprised if we actually have any hyper-productive receivers coming from that organization anytime soon, unless they're able to bring in that generational type quarterback, which I'm unsure if Zach Wilson is. Well, Detroit had that generational quarterback with Matthew Stafford. Now Matthew Stafford is set up in a perfect situation going forward. Not only has he averaged in Detroit, he has averaged the quarterback 5 in the standings at the end of the year in terms of his passing yards total. Now, going over to Los Angeles, This is a team that propped up Jared Goff to at one point be seen not as an elite quarterback, but a very good QB. Jared Goff went out there in Los Angeles. The second Sean McVay took over, the quarterback 10, 4, 3, and 14th with passing yards at the end of the season. Now, you send him over to Detroit, falls down to 26th because, of course, it was always the situation in Los Angeles. It was never Jared Goff for that success. Matthew Stafford comes over to Los Angeles and immediately is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL with his passing yards. Now, I also wanted to include someone like Derek Carr in this video, but diving into it, I want to give this example on why I think Stafford is also such a good investment at this time, and that's going to be the contract that he has. So Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr have a very similar contract on the surface. Matthew Stafford has, say, 4 years, $160 million, whereas you have Derek Carr for 3 years and $121 million. So yeah, $40 million a year for each quarterback. Is there really a difference? There is a massive difference. So if you're looking at the dead cap, the guaranteed money between Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford is essentially guaranteed to be the starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams through 2025. You have Stafford on your team right now. You have him in that Rams situation, 2020, 2023, 2024, 2025, guaranteed. Whereas if you're looking at Derek Carr, guaranteed money is only for this year. After that, $5 million guaranteed, $3 million guaranteed. So if you're sitting in 2024, going into the 2024 season, the Raiders may be in a situation where they're going, okay, we can cut Derek Carr and we can save $40 million. Would we rather bring in a rookie quarterback and pay him $8 million, or would we rather pay Derek Carr $40 million? Now, I'm not saying that means Derek Carr is going to get cut, but I'm saying it's a possibility. So even if somehow Matthew Stafford were to fail, which he's never done before, Matthew Stafford has never failed in terms of deriving passing volume in an NFL offense. Now he's in a much better situation than he's been in throughout his entire NFL career. Even if he were to fail, the Rams can't get rid of the man. Whereas if Derek Carr were to fail, you're going to have the Raiders screaming for it. Now, if you're looking at his value right now, Matthew Stafford, according to Keep Trade Cut, after Austin Eckler, after Tyreek Hill, right now, the 39th player. If you're looking at where Trevor Lawrence is going, Trevor Lawrence is the 23rd compared to Matthew Stafford at 39. Stafford's going at the end of the 4th compared to Trevor Lawrence at the end of the 2nd round. I would trade Trevor Lawrence for Matthew Stafford straight up in a heartbeat. I'd be like, hey man, yeah, I'll give you a 2nd round pick as well. I'll give you a 3rd round pick. Just take Trevor Lawrence. Give me Stafford. Give me the security. Give me a quarterback that I know is going to provide that stable production over the next 4 to 5 seasons. Because in Dynasty Fantasy Football, everybody wants to look a decade out. Everybody wants to talk about 15. No, we're looking 5 seasons out at the very, 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 very most. I mean, you really shouldn't even be looking 5 years out in a lot of these leagues. But I hope this video helped you all. Please go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. That's all I got for you. Hope you have a great day, and hope I get to see you with the video tomorrow.